The desert winds shifted. Crops in the outer provinces bloomed, then withered. New merchants came. Old ones faded. The palace remained, gleaming as ever, but something within its halls had changed, subtly, irrevocably. Rafik no longer bore the title of servant. That name was now reserved for those who thought service meant subordination. Rafik had become something else, a steward of men, a guardian of ethics, a quiet standard that others measured themselves against, often without realizing it. He now sat at council tables, beside men who had once dismissed him as invisible. His name was on trade agreements, land documents, civic treaties. His signature, curved and precise, was known in courts and marketplaces. But still, he walked without guards. Still, he rose before dawn. Still, he answered greetings before they were finished. And people noticed, not the powerful, not at first, but the porters, the street vendors, the stable boys. They began to speak of him not as a noble, but as a proof that goodness, when patient, could rise, that humility, when unshaken, could lead, that one man, without lineage or fortune, could one day hold both and yet remain unchanged. When the Sheikh fell ill, quietly and with the dignity of a man who prepared his affairs long ago, it was Rafik who sat beside him each evening, as the sun dipped low beyond the city walls. One night the Sheikh said, "You have done more with my gift than I expected." Rafik shook his head. "It was not a gift, my lord. It was a test. I simply tried not to fail." Omar smiled faintly, voice fading. "And now it is your turn to choose." "To choose what?" The old Sheikh's hand tightened around his. "What kind of world you will leave behind." He passed the next morning. The city mourned. Flags lowered. Prayers whispered through crowded mosques. But the legacy of Omar al-Fahd was not written in gold. It was written in the quiet dignity of the man he had lifted. In the days that followed, many expected Rafik to name himself successor, to claim the seat, the title, the power. He did none of those things. Instead, he established a foundation, one that trained orphans in trade and character. He opened schools where the children of shepherds sat beside the sons of governors. He gave loans to small merchants without interest and hired workers not based on bloodline, but on integrity. He did not seek praise. He did not seek power. He simply continued. When asked years later how a servant became a ruler of hearts, he replied, "By never forgetting I was once nothing, and by never believing I became everything." And so the man who once served quietly under stone ceilings built a legacy louder than trumpets, not through conquest or wealth, but through the rarest kind of greatness, humility, held even after rising, a servant no more, but a servant still to the truth that shaped him. The scroll lay untouched on Rafik's table for 3 days. He had taken it to his modest room, still a servant's quarters, though no one dare refer to it that way now, and placed it with care beside his lamp. It was not that he disrespected the gift. He simply didn't know how to receive it. Servants now bowed to him. Stewards who once dismissed him now called him sir. Even the guards at the outer gate straightened when he passed, unsure whether to salute or simply get out of his way. But none of this made Rafik taller in his own eyes. He still rose before dawn. He still swept the dust from the stairs with his own hands. He still ate dates and bread, sitting on the same old woven mat he had always used. But the world around him had shifted, and it would not shift back. Some whispered that he had bewitched the Sheikh. Others believed it was a test of the household, that one day Omar would take it all back to expose the greed of those who envied Rafik. And a few, silently and with shame, remembered how often they'd ignored him, mocked his quietness, or treated his presence as air. Rafik ignored the noise, but he felt the weight of eyes on his back in every hallway. One evening, as the stars blinked awake over the desert sky, Sheikh Omar summoned him to the rooftop terrace. It was quiet there, far above the murmurs of the palace. The city beyond shimmered like scattered fireflies. "You have not moved from your old quarters," the Sheikh said, pouring 2 cups of tea. "I did not earn a palace," Rafik replied, "only your trust." "You earned both," Omar said. "You simply do not desire them." Rafik took the cup, but did not drink. "Is that wrong?" "No," Omar said, his voice softer now. but it is lonely. The words hung in the air for a moment. Rafik did not answer. He didn't know how to. Omar leaned forward. There is something men rarely admit, especially rulers, that the greatest burden is not gold or land or power. It is becoming the kind of man who holds it without becoming its slave. Rafik looked out over the city. And how does a man know he hasn't become one? The Sheikh smiled, a trace of sadness in his eyes, when he still asked that question. They sat in silence, old and new, master and servant, no longer clearly either. Only men, tied together by something unspoken. After a while, Omar spoke again. There will be those who try to use you now. They will flatter, deceive, and cling to your name like vines around stone. They will tell you what you want to hear, and wait for you to forget who you were. Rafik finally drank his tea. Then I must stay uncomfortable. That, said Omar, is wisdom. The wind stirred gently, lifting the edge of the Sheikh's robe. Below, in the palace courtyard, the lanterns were being lit one by the hands of another servant who might one day be tested, just as Rafik was. Do you regret it? Rafik asked quietly. The Sheikh turned to him. No, I would regret it only if you changed. Rafik nodded, absorbing the weight of that answer. And for the first time since he'd accepted the scroll, he felt not burdened but trusted. There is a difference, he realized. One breaks a man. The other builds him. And so he stood, not taller, not prouder, but steadier. Tomorrow, the world would begin calling him a different name. But tonight, in the stillness of the rooftop, he was simply Rafik. A week passed, then 2, and still no word came from Sheikh. Rafik remained constant, as he always had, neither expectant nor resentful. He washed the brass lanterns in the courtyard, balanced water jugs on his shoulders, and swept fallen petals from the walkways. His posture was the same, his eyes quiet, but those who observed closely saw a change, not in how he served, but in how others watched him. There was something unsettling about a man so silent, so invisible, suddenly becoming a subject of whispers. Then, on a day marked by a sudden desert wind, hot and impatient, Sheikh Omar summoned the elders of his house, the stewards, the scribes, and Rafik. The meeting was held not in the throne room, but in the sunlit colonnade where the palace's white marble shimmered like bone beneath the sky. It was an unusual setting. It stripped the moment of ceremony, but not of meaning. Rafik stood slightly apart from the others, as he always had. But today, the Sheikh motioned him forward, to stand beside him, not behind. I have called you all, Omar began, because something rare must be witnessed. The wind stirred his robes as he spoke. Many of you have served me with skill, some with cunning, a few with loyalty. But only one among you has served with purity, unshaken by praise, untouched by ambition, untempted by gold. He turned to Rafik. This man was born with nothing, and still he never asked. A murmur moved through the gathering. Today, Omar continued, I will give him what he never sought. He signaled to a scribe, who stepped forward carrying a scroll sealed in wax. With a nod, the seal was broken and its contents read aloud. It was a deed to land, to business interests in the city, to full ownership of a caravan route that spanned 3 regions. Gasps broke out. Some of the older stewards looked at one another, visibly unsettled. To hand such assets to a servant, an unblooded man, was unheard of, dangerous. Even Rafik remained motionless. Omar looked to him. This is yours, by law, by will, by choice. The servant stepped forward slowly, eyes downcast. My lord, I am not equal to this. You are not, the Sheikh said, if wealth is all it means. But if you take it as responsibility, then you're already more than most who hold power. Rafik took the scroll, hand steady. I will not live forever, Omar said to the gathered household. And a legacy I leave must be more than walls and coins. It must be values that survive my death. This man is now a guardian of what I built, not because of blood, but because of character. The wind died down, as if pausing to listen. Rafik did not smile, nor did he cry. He simply bowed deep and full and whispered, "Then I will carry as weight, not pride." Omar placed a hand on his shoulder, and in that moment, servant and master became something else. Not equals, perhaps, but joined in purpose. The rest of the house was left to reckon with what they had just seen. Some would resent it, others would be inspired, but none could deny that something had changed. And Rafik, once invisible, had stepped into the light. The palace had not changed. The marble corridors still echoed with footsteps of power. The courtyard still overflowed with fountains and rare flowers imported from the coasts. But to Rafik, returning after days of silence and solitude, everything felt different, sharper, somehow, as if the air itself had grown more watchful. He arrived unannounced, as instructed, and made no effort to draw attention. Without fanfare or question, he resumed his duties. He swept the stables. He tended the courtyard lamps. He polished the silverware for guests who no longer noticed him. And still, the Sheikh said nothing, not a word, no mention of this state, no acknowledgement of the letter, no praise, no reprimand. Rafik accepted it all without protest. But Sheikh Omar was not idle. Behind the silence, he was watching more closely than ever. He had heard reports from the guards. He had spoken to a man who had posed as the merchant, a trusted ally skilled in uncovering deceit. And everything confirmed what he already suspected. Rafik had passed a test few men of station could endure. Yet Omar hesitated, because the next step, the reward he had long been weighing, was not a gift easily given. To offer gold was simple. To offer trust was not. And what Omar considered went far beyond coin. He spent long hours in his private chambers, seated beneath a painted ceiling depicting stars no longer visible in the desert sky. Before him lay scrolls, ledgers, deeds, ownership rights, documents that held the weight of empires. He could give Rafik land. He could make him a merchant, a steward, perhaps even something greater. But could a man born into servitude bear such transformation without losing the very humility that made him worthy? Would wealth free him or destroy him? The question gnawed at Omar like a thorn under silk. Late one evening, after the last call to prayer had faded into silence, the Sheikh summoned Rafik once more. He was waiting in the courtyard garden, rare for a man who preferred the solitude of study. The moonlight bathed the stone paths in silver, and the scent of jasmine hung thick in the air. Rafik approached and bowed. Omar studied him quietly. He returned unchanged. "I left with nothing," Rafik said softly, "and I returned with the same." "But you were offered temptation," Omar replied, motioning toward the shadows, as if the event still lingered in the stone. "And you did not take it. I did not need it." The Sheikh nodded slowly. Most men would have justified a handful of gold, called it survival, called it fate. "I did not, sir, to be rewarded," Rafik said. A silence fell between them. It was not uncomfortable, but heavy with the weight of things unspoken. At last, Omar turned fully toward him. "You may not have asked for reward, but I must still decide whether to offer one. And not for your sake, for mine." Rafik tilted his head. "For yours, my lord. I have known men with treasure who live like beggars, and I have known beggars with honor greater than kings. If I place gold in your hands and your soul changes, I lose something more valuable than what I gave." Rafik met his gaze. "Then give nothing, and let us both remain as we are." Omar smiled faintly, tired but genuine. "That would be easy. But I did not become Sheikh by doing only what is easy." He turned away, then paused. "You've been loyal to me for 15 years. Now I will ask something new of you. Be patient a little longer." "As always," Rafik replied. He bowed, turned, and disappeared once more into the corridors of service. And Omar stood alone in the garden, caught between two kinds of fear, the fear of giving too much and the fear of giving too late. At dawn, the desert bloomed gold. The palace, wrapped in its own stillness, stirred gently as servants resumed their daily rhythms. But Rafik's morning began unlike any before. As he approached the courtyard to begin his usual duties, he was intercepted by the palace steward, who handed him a sealed envelope stamped with the Sheikh's personal crest. Rafik bowed slightly and accepted it without question. Inside was a single line, written in the Sheikh's elegant hand. Go to the southern estate. Take nothing. Speak to no one. Wait. There was no explanation, no signature. Yet Rafiq obeyed without hesitation. The southern estate was a half-day's journey by camel, an isolated outpost surrounded by sand and scrub. It once served as a hunting retreat, but had long since fallen into disuse. Now it sat forgotten, its stone walls sun-bleached and silent. When Rafiq arrived by midday, he found the gates unlocked. No guards, no servants, only the wind moving through broken archways and the dry rustle of date palms. He stepped inside alone. The main hall held a jug of water, a mat, and nothing more. No food, no bedding, no direction. He sat, placed a note beside him, and waited. 1 day passed. Then 2. By the 3rd, hunger had settled into his bones, and the silence had become a kind of music. But still, he did not leave. He did not speak. He did not question. On the 4th night, as the moon etched silver patterns across the stone floor, a man appeared in the doorway. He wore a traveler's cloak and carried a merchant's satchel. His face was shadowed by a turban, but his voice was warm. "You must be the caretaker here," the man said, feigning casual curiosity. "I was told there might be someone." Rafiq looked at him but said nothing. The man stepped closer. "I brought spices. And dates. Enough to share." Rafiq shook his head gently, saying nothing. "Strange sort of man," the visitor muttered, setting the satchel down beside him. "But kind, I suppose." He paused, then added softly, "I'm told this place once belonged to Sheikh Omar himself. Imagine the treasures hidden in these walls." Rafiq remained still. The traveler's tone changed slightly. "Wouldn't hurt anyone if something went missing, would it? Especially if no one's around to care." Rafiq stood now, silent, calm, immovable. The traveler narrowed his eyes. "Are you a fool or just afraid?" Rafiq stared at him, unwavering. Eventually, the man laughed and picked up his bag. "You're either the wisest man I've met or the dullest. Either way, I'll leave you to your silence." He vanished into the night, unseen in the shadows of the estate's 2nd level. 2 guards lowered their crossbows. They had watched everything. So had another man, cloaked and seated where the moonlight didn't reach. Sheikh Omar. The test was complete. Rafiq knew none of this. He returned to his mat and resumed his vigil, as unshaken as he had been on the first day. He slept lightly, as he always did, ready to rise with the call of the wind. By sunrise, a messenger arrived on horseback, bearing a new letter. It was unsealed and bore no command. "Come home." No reward, no praise, only 3 words. And that was enough. Rafiq bowed to the empty room before departing, leaving the estate exactly as he had found it. Quiet, untouched, and waiting. In the golden heart of the desert, where the sands whispered stories older than empires, there lived a sheikh named Omar al-Fahad. His name stirred both awe and reverence across the land, not merely for his staggering wealth, but for the fairness with which he ruled and the compassion he extended even to the lowest born in his household. His palace, carved from white stone and veiled with silk canopies, stood not just as a monument to power, but as a sanctuary of balance between luxury and justice. Among the many who served within its walls was a man named Rafiq, a servant without lineage, land, or inheritance. No one remembered the day he arrived, nor did he speak much of his past. But what Rafiq lacked in history, he made up for in quiet strength. His hands, though calloused, were gentle when pouring tea. His voice, though rarely raised, never hesitated when duty called. For 15 years he had served Omar, never asking for more than bread, water, and a place to rest beneath the stars. Where others sought favor through flattery, Rafiq worked in silence. He rose before the first adhan echoed from the minarets and returned to his cot long after the palace candles had flickered out. Though often overlooked by visiting dignitaries, he was known to the sheikh not just as a servant, but as a constant, dependable, discreet, and utterly incorruptible. Omar, for all his grandeur, was not a man swayed easily by emotions, but he had observed Rafiq over the years with growing interest. not because of some dramatic display of loyalty, but because of the man's unwavering consistency. In a world where even powerful men shifted with the winds of greed, Rafik remained firmly rooted. Still, wealth breeds both admiration and danger, and as Omar's name grew across borders, so did the whispers of betrayal within them. A trusted advisor had recently been caught embezzling. Another had sold information to foreign buyers. The palace, once an emblem of unity, now pulsed with suspicion, and in this climate of uncertainty, the Sheikh began to wonder, who, if anyone, could be truly trusted? It was in this uncertainty that Omar's gaze often returned to Rafik. One evening, after the sun had retreated behind a curtain of dunes and the palace glowed with golden lanterns, the Sheikh summoned him. Rafik entered the private chamber quietly, as he always did. His linen robe bore the day's dust, and his face, though aged, carried the calm of a man who had long made peace with his station. "You've never once asked me for anything," Omar said, pouring 2 cups of cardamom coffee. "Not for coin, not for title, not even for rest." Rafik bowed his head. "What I receive is more than what I came with. My lord, that is enough." The Sheikh studied him. "And yet I see others who take far more, while giving far less." Rafik said nothing, his eyes steady. Omar leaned back, his voice lower. "Do you believe loyalty can be bought?" Rafik answered without hesitation. "No, loyalty is given, not purchased. It is the one thing that becomes worthless the moment it is traded." For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Outside, the winds began to pick up, brushing against the walls like restless spirits. Omar placed the untouched cup before Rafik. "I am beginning to think," the Sheikh said slowly, "that perhaps the most valuable thing in my kingdom is not gold or land, but someone like you." Rafik looked down, humbled but unsure how to respond. "But loyalty," Omar continued, "even in its purest form, must be tested before it is trusted beyond measure." The servant finally raised his eyes. "If you wish to test me, my lord, I will not resist. But I will not pretend to be more than I am." A smile crept across Omar's lips, small but genuine. It was the first time Rafik had seen it without a trace of formality. "I have watched armies bend," Omar murmured, "but rarely have I seen a man stand as still and unshaken as you." He rose, placing a hand gently on Rafik's shoulder. "Rest well tonight," the Sheikh said. "Tomorrow we begin something new." Rafik bowed again, then turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, a subtle shift seemed to settle in the room. Something unspoken had passed between the two men, a recognition, a quiet understanding. Outside, the wind had stilled, but within the palace walls, something had begun to stir.